First up, it's the Tory infighting. A scoop in the Times today by Sam Coates reveals that Tory MPs consider the Chancellor of the Exchequer so toxic that they're ready to vote against their own government's budget, at least in parts, in order to force Theresa May to get rid of him and replace him with someone a bit less of a desiccated calculating machine. Spreadsheet Phil, as he's known, is not called that for nothing. He's a speak-your-weight machine who's certainly entirely unsuited to getting the Tories back on track and back up on top of the public opinion polls, where, I remind you, there are now 5 whole points behind Jeremy Corbyn. Who'd have thunk it? Now, the proximate cause for the incipient rebellion is a quite extraordinary decision that Hammond made in a speech the weekend before last, in which, to get down with the kids, he proposed the budget redistributing wealth from old and older people to young and younger people. Now, there may very well be an economic case for that. There certainly isn't a political case. They tried that in the general election just a few months ago, and look what happened. Their proposal, the kind of geriatric tax to take money away from people, take property away from people, force people to pay for care through their property and their bank balances, well, it bombed at the ballot box, which in democratic politics is actually the only thing that counts. But here's the rub. Theresa May is so weak that she can't live with Hammond or Boris Johnson, and I'll come to him in a minute. She can't live with them, but she can't live without them. She's so weak that getting rid of either or both of them would undoubtedly provoke a leadership challenge, which she would surely use. And in the middle of the Brexit negotiations, where Britain is up against it, and again about which more later, then it all adds up to a government that is utterly paralysed. Now, as I speak, Bonkers Boris is on the television giving a blood-curdling speech to Chatham House. He's saying that he's backing Donald Trump when half the White House doesn't back Donald Trump. The generals in the White House are terrified, having sleepless nights about the danger of Donald Trump triggering thermonuclear war, not with North Korea, but with its neighbours, Russia and China. But Boris, Billy Bunter, fresh from the tuck house, from the tuck shop, he is giving his full backing right now to Donald J. Trump. He is saying that the Iran deal should be defended, despite what he says, Iran's provocative and dangerous behaviour. Well, if Iran is provocative and dangerous, why are you insisting on keeping the deal? Iran hasn't invaded anybody in more than 200 years. Yes, 200 years. But it's been invaded. It was invaded by Iraq, by Saddam Hussein, armed to the teeth by us. So, frankly, we've got a bore in number 11 Downing Street, whose behaviour is increasingly zany, and we've got a zany Foreign Secretary who appears to me to have taken leave of his senses. And all of this is about who's going to occupy number 10 Downing Street. Now, there's a long history of this. I've been in politics, believe it or not, dear listener, for 50 years this year. I joined the Labour Party when I was 13 years old, and I'm now 63, though I don't look it. Now, maybe I shouldn't have said that. The wife thinks I'm 45. But in the history of just my time in politics, there has always been a relationship of tension between numbers 10 and 11 Downing Street. I can go back to Roy Jenkins, whom I defeated and put out of Parliament, for which he thanked me because he then retired to the more sedate benches in the House of Lords. Roy Jenkins was an utterly treacherous Chancellor of the Exchequer. Why? Because he wanted Harold Wilson's job, and he never got it, thank God. But he tried every day. He woke up every day to work out how he could undermine the Prime Minister, and in the end, in 1970, he actually undermined his own party and put them out of office altogether with the budget that he introduced prior to the June general election of that time. Now, I've been through many others. Geoffrey Howe was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He didn't want Margaret Thatcher's job, but he didn't like the job that Margaret Thatcher was doing. So he ultimately sabotaged his own Prime Minister in one of the most devastating, given that, as Dennis Healy said, being attacked by Sir Geoffrey Howe was like being savaged by a dead sheep. Well, the dead sheep roared that day, and I was there in the chamber when it happened. And after he had sat down, no one was in any doubt that Michael Heseltine would launch a leadership challenge the very next day or so. And that's exactly what happened. I was in Parliament when Nigel Lawson, nowadays better known as the father of Nigella Lawson, but then the all-powerful Chancellor of the Exchequer, when he was undermined by Mrs. Thatcher's appointment of Sir Alan Waters as her own economics advisor. It's come to something when the Prime Minister has an economics advisor, when our next-door neighbour is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I was present for the extremely rocky relationship between two formerly close friends, the Norman Lamont of Miss Whiplash fame. Not that he had anything carnal with Miss Whiplash, he was just her landlord, and he didn't hear any of the smacks of firm government that were going on in the basement downstairs. He too had to be dispensed with by John Major, or the whole government might have collapsed. And on the subject of two formerly close friends who lived a life of extreme tension, well, the relationship between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, as everyone now knows and I knew at the time, was just a little short of nuclear. The relationship was a bit like Trump versus the rocket man, Kim Jong-il. One never knew who was going to launch the thermonuclear rockets first. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me that there's a tension between Theresa May and Philip Hammond. But, you know, the truth is, so feeble are both of them that it's one of those fights, like Henry Kissinger said of the Iran-Iraq war, it's a pity both can't lose. And both might actually lose. Because, as I said, she either has to put up with crazy Phil or sack him. And if she sacks him, she may end up sacked herself. And the equal and opposite problem is that Boris Johnson is so openly, so nakedly after her job that there might be a leadership contest anyway. And finally, let me say this. These Brexit negotiations have become a farce. First of all, we have a government which is weak, which went to the country and failed to get a mandate, lost the majority that they already have. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that Britain has a fifth column, which is the biggest column in town, which is openly intriguing with the foreign adversary in this contest in order that the foreign adversary wins. That fifth column is the majority of Conservative MPs, the majority of Labour MPs, all of the Liberal Democrats, all of the Scottish and Welsh nationalists, and so on. But if that's where it ended, the problem wouldn't be so great. Almost all of the House of Lords is against Brexit. Almost all of Whitehall is against Brexit. Almost all of the deep state is against Brexit. All of the City of London is against Brexit. Whatever remains of British industrial capital is against Brexit. All of the establishment is against Brexit. And little Tony Blair is wheedling his way around them, gathering big money for the battles to come. He's even got, what's his name? Alistair Campbell out there batting. They've even got little Ben Bradshaw waving his stick at the bear, blaming the Russians for Brexit. Why not? We blame them for everything else. Now, given all of that, it's a tough negotiation for sure, which is why, in my view, we oughtn't to be negotiating at all. What is there to negotiate about? We should have sent on day one a simple email to the European Union. It's been marvellous. Well, not really, but we're prepared to say it. We have been told by the British people that we must leave. We want to leave on good terms with you. We have no animus towards you at all. Well, not much. We will place no barriers on your goods and services and assume that you will reciprocate. We will not send any of your nationals settled here out of our country, and we presume that you will reciprocate. We will continue to collaborate with you on security and terrorism and crime, as we do with the United States, as we do with any other country in the world, and we presume that you will reciprocate. And we will guarantee to our people that our standards of labour law, environment law, human rights protection, etc., will be at least as robust as the protections offered in the European Union. Bye-bye. We're out of here. That is all we needed to do. And then they would have come to us and said, well, let's put that down in writing. Let's agree in writing that neither side will erect tariffs and barriers to trade with each other. But when you go into a negotiation and you agree a sequence in which nothing will even be discussed, never mind negotiated, until you have agreed to pay us a king's ransom, currently standing, by the way, Theresa May's offer just a day or two ago of £60 billion before we even move on to the negotiation, you're asking for trouble. And if you don't say that no deal is better than a bad deal, then you are positively inviting the worst deal possible. I'll be talking to a Tory grandee, though he might not like me describing him as such, after this.